Welcome to our latest episode of the Good Life, Great Careers podcast. My name is Brian Civic, and I am the Director of Workforce Training and Development for the state of Nebraska, and I'm joined by Caitlin Betts, who is the Director of Talent Acquisition for the state of Nebraska. The purpose of this podcast, if you're new to listening to us, is to help bring awareness and shine a spotlight on the fact that Nebraska State Government is not only one of the largest employers in the state of Nebraska, but also is the most diverse when it comes to career opportunities. In fact, right now there's hundreds of job openings where you can begin a new career with Nebraska State Government, and you can check those out at statejobs.nebraska.gov and click on Find a State Job link. We're going to talk about that a little bit more at the end of the podcast, so I encourage you to stay tuned all the way through to the end, and we'll talk about that some more. In each episode, we invite a different state teammate on to talk about their own unique career journey, not only about their career, but also their experience within Nebraska State Government, and to share a little bit about their agency and what their agency does. Our guest today has a very unique career journey. He's also played an important role in helping set Nebraska State Government apart as a premier destination employer and an employer of choice. Joining us today is Jason Jackson. Jason is the Chief Human Resource Officer for Governor Pete Ricketts. He's also the Director of the Department of Administrative Services. So Director Jackson, thank you for taking time out of your very busy schedule today, especially since for those of you who are listening, I completely messed up, and this is our second take because I forgot to hit the record on the audio for the first take. So, Director Jackson, very appreciative of the extra time that you're giving us so we can record this podcast. So let's just start off by opening it up and having you share a little bit about yourself. Tell us, who is Jason Jackson?
Yeah, my pleasure. And I'm sorry for your listeners because the first answers were really good. So I think we're going to have trouble replicating that. But
it was amazing.
It's fine. Actually, credit to you, Brian, because it's kind of courageous to notice halfway through that we weren't recording. I think my temptation would be to just let your guest just continue to blather on and and wonder about why the show didn't post at some point in the future. But nonetheless, hey, Brian, Caitlin, thanks for having me on once again. It's a pleasure to be here. The show is exciting. The studio down here looks absolutely great. So it's a pleasure to talk about careers in state government with both of you. I think, Brian, your question was just tell folks about myself a little bit. Originally from California, born and raised in San Jose, California. First career experience was in the Navy. I went to the Naval Academy for my undergrad, graduated in 2002, right into Iraqi freedom and enduring freedom. Spent 5 years in the Navy, driving ships and landing Marines on the beach. So that was kind of my formative career experience. Went from that into the tech industry, all in San Diego. Went to work for Intuit, which is a software kind of financial services company. Spent 10 years there before coming back into public service with state government here in Nebraska. First in the governor's office as his HR officer, and then most recently in an operational role leading administrative services. On the personal side, my wife Gina and I have been married for nearly 20 years. We have 4 kiddos, ages 13 to 6, and they keep us very busy. And if we're not here at work, we're generally on the baseball field or chasing them around the soccer field and stuff like that. So they're kind of the totality of our recreational experience right now as being parents to the 4 kiddos. But we love it here in Nebraska. So we've been here in Nebraska for 6 years now. It's definitely our home. Have felt wonderfully welcomed by the state and all its people. The kids are thriving here and just couldn't be happier for the change to come into Nebraska's state government. So.
Well, thank you, Director Jackson, for being here with us today. We're certainly glad that you found your way to Nebraska. Tell us a little bit about that journey that's kind of a change, I would think, from California to Nebraska. So what brought you here? Yeah,
great question. And it gives me an opportunity to kind of talk about my career in a little greater detail. So, growing up, I was always going to be an admiral. That's what I wanted to do. I was kind of one of these kids that was, and I know it's kind of a rarity, but I was locked in on what my career was going to be really from when I was 7 years old on. That's what I was going to do. Actually, the first thing I wanted to do was be an astronaut. But after being an astronaut, and that I probably outgrew being an astronaut by maybe second grade, I was going to be an admiral. That was kind of a family tradition in my family. I was actually the 3rd generation in my family to go to the Naval Academy. And so that was kind of what I wanted to do. loved my experience at the Naval Academy. Definitely got a lot of fulfillment out of my career, my early career as a junior officer in the Navy. Felt like we did a lot of great work there, and of course it was an honor to serve our country. But when I hit my service commitment, it was kind of my first opportunity to make a career decision for myself, and we were kind of growing our family. I was pursuing grad school. There was a lot of instability in a military career at that point, just with what events that were happening around the world. And so I made a decision to leave military service and go into the private sector, and had what I would have came to learn is a very typical veteran experience in terms of a career transition, in terms of not really knowing how your skills translate into a private sector or a civilian context, and going through kind of an arduous career journey. Which ultimately didn't bear fruit until I just had like a fortuitous conversation with my best buddy from high school was getting married, and I was talking to his his dad rather, and his dad was an executive at Intuit, which is a software services company, and it told him I was interested in working in that sector. My background was kind of general operations management, and within a couple weeks' time, I had a job opportunity there. Which ultimately kind of grew into, HR. We talk in the HR community about how we often get into HR by accident, and that was certainly my case. Having been at Intuit for a couple years, they were going through an HR transition to kind of a global HR business partner and shared services model, and they wanted somebody who had operational acumen leading their shared services team. So that's how I came to be kind of plucked and put into HR, and found I just loved the work. I loved how people-centric it was, but it was still strategic and demanded some intellectual agility. And but found myself still missing the public service that I had enjoyed in the military. And so that's ultimately led to boomeranging back into public service and looking for an opportunity in state government, and ultimately finding one here in Nebraska. Which is a crazy story in and of itself, because I was just going through kind of a job search, and this was late 2015, early 2016. And at that time, the head HR position in one of our agencies was open, and I threw my hat in the ring and applied to that position. And I was interviewed by my predecessor in the governor's office, and our family was really kind of going through this. Geez, this is a big change. San Diego to Nebraska, is this right for us right now? And my wife would tell you, like, we were praying and basically saying, hey, God, you're gonna have to do something affirmative for us to know that this is the right thing. It's just too big a leap for us to take on our own. And no kidding, the very next day, I got a call from my predecessor in the governor's office, who had been part of the interview panel. And she said, Jason, we like you for this role in the agencies. But we actually think you would be a better fit to come work for Governor Ricketts on his staff as his HR business partner. And it was like, that was just too clear that this is the right move for our family and for my career at that time. And so that's how we came to be in Nebraska. Been here now 6 years, spent the whole duration of that on the governor's staff as his HR business partner, and then the last 3 years in an operational role, leading administrative services, which has also been very fulfilling.
So you've had an amazing career journey. I mean, from your service in the military, which, thank you for your service, by the way. I'm partial to the Navy. I didn't serve myself.
Justifiably so.
My grandfather served in World War II in the Navy, so I'm partial.
In what
to
capacity?
He was in the Pacific Theater. Honestly,
Okay.
I'm not sure what.
Cool.
I did some research one time and found the ship he served on. I don't remember the name of it. But also Top Gun, the first one came out when I was in junior high. Of course, for a 3 or 4 year period, I was going to be Maverick.
There you go. Yeah.
So I am partial to the Navy. But anyway, fascinating career, military service, going into the tech sector then, and now in the public sector, serving here in Nebraska. What maybe over the last 5 or 6 years in Nebraska maybe sets it apart, and how did your career prepare you up to what you're doing now?
Yeah, great question. First, I can't resist the temptation to not make a Navy joke, because you referenced Top Gun and Maverick, and I think the Navy has the best movies. Like, that's what in terms of like the services setting it apart. I was joking with some guys in some other services recently, and it's like, in every every Army movie is very morbid, like a ton of people die, and it's usually there's like some really heavy themes associated with it, and every Navy movie, it's like guys in choker white uniforms getting the girl. You know what I mean? Like there's, very rarely does anybody die in the movie. It's so little wonder that the Navy does better from a recruiting perspective, given the Hollywood portrayal. Anyway, I've lost my train of thought. What was your question?
What maybe over the
what distinguishes Nebraska? And I think a lot of things. A couple of things come immediately to mind. One, I came into state government service kind of with a bias fueled by, I think, the prejudices of other people about what government is and what government service is, and found the actual experience to be completely at odds with those expectations. Particularly I think my peers in the tech industry back in the day would be very surprised to learn just how agile and entrepreneurial and innovative we are. And so that's been absolutely wonderful. Like I've not only felt, I've experienced, and I've observed that our teammates at all levels in government are empowered to really make changes that are impacting their work. And not only empowered to do so, but equipped with the tools to do so. When we think about the governor's leadership and the implementation of the Center of Operational Excellence and the training in Lean Six Sigma, that everybody in state government has gone through. So that's been actually a wonderful surprise that I also think differentiates us as an employer because, people know when they're coming here that their opinion will be valued. They'll be trained and get some great learning experiences that they can immediately apply in their roles to improve services for Nebraskans, but also take with them throughout their career. So that's one thing, just kind of as the experience of a teammate. The other thing I think as an HR practitioner and as an HR business partner and as a talent steward, thinking about Nebraska State Government and our positioning in the marketplace for talent, there's a few things that really differentiate us from other employers that are significant competitive advantages. One is we give people leadership opportunities at a much earlier stage in their career than they would otherwise enjoy. So if you come in and you have some capability and some leadership acumen and the aspiration to do so, there's an infinite amount of runway in front of you to lead teams and lead others and influence across and just develop some really cool leadership experiences right away. Secondly, the work that we do is altruistically motivated. When I was working it into it, I loved the work. I loved my teammates. But at the end of the day, I couldn't attach my individual work product to the number of TurboTax units we sold or the degree to which the stock price rose and fell. And even if we could, it didn't feel particularly altruistic. The work that we do in Nebraska State Government is very altruistic. It's service-oriented. We're all in public service. And the pandemic in the last couple of years has given us some real-world lived experiences about the way in which that service impacts our community and our neighbors. We see around the country the governments that performed well and those that didn't, the health outcomes for the people experienced, educational outcomes for children, economic outcomes for families and job seekers and businesses. And Nebraska in almost every dimension performed very well. And I think that's attributable to the work that we've done in Nebraska State Government. So we're making an impact. We can see that impact on our community. And I think people derive meaning from that, and that should, give them value and purpose in their work. And then the final thing I would point to is the diversity of the work that we do is bar none exceeds any other employer in the state. You want to be a law enforcement officer, you can do that. You want to be a nurse, you can do that. You want to work in trades, you can do that. You want to work on cars, you can do that. You want to be a teacher, you can do that. You want to be an HR professional, you can do that. Literally almost an infinite number of career opportunities are available in state government. And I can't think of any other employer for which that's the case.
Absolutely. You've highlighted, I think, a lot of the great things, especially from a talent acquisition perspective of why it's great to work for the state of Nebraska, but it really goes beyond that. And a lot of the things that you have led through the administration, some of these initiatives, Talk more about some of those things that have been implemented recently. For example, something I really admire about you is your family focus. Mm-hmm. It's not uncommon to see your kids in the office or to know that you're heading out to a baseball game or whatever. And that's really something that's been, I think, important to our workforce. And that's just one example of some of the initiatives of being family friendly.
Yeah, I'm glad that's coming through. So, and I couldn't agree more. I think, Nebraska State Government should reflect the values of Nebraskans. And one of the things that makes us wonderful as a state is that this is a wonderful state to raise a family. And so when we show up as, a government service provider to our citizens, I know we show up that way, but we should also show up that way as an employer for our teammates that work here. And oh, by the way, that's also a competitive differentiator for us in terms of job seekers and this being a great place to work. And so we have done a lot around, making the state government the best employer in the state for families and young moms in particular. And some of those, initiatives have included, our Bring Your Kids to Work initiative, because we know that, a lot of young moms leave the workforce when they're forced into a decision around, child care alternatives or staying home to care for children and those types of things. So if we can alleviate some of that burden by making it okay to bring your kid to work, and just part of our culture, who doesn't like seeing little kids? I mean, we all like little kids. Then, we can enable a lot of young moms to continue their careers in public service. And that's to the advantage of everybody. Of course, the family and that teammate, but also Nebraskans who are, benefiting from having a more talented workforce than would otherwise be supporting our communities. Doing things like, really in our wellness and benefits plans, making maternity care very, very low cost is another thing. Because we want to support families. We want to come alongside families as they're growing. And then we've done a lot of work around, trying to be veteran friendly as well. Nebraska under Governor Ricketts' leadership prides ourselves on being the most veteran-friendly state in the country. And again, so it's about making how we show up as an employer for our teammates in Nebraska State Government the same way that our constituents and our citizens would have us show up when we're serving Nebraskans. And so things around, supporting the spouses of transitioning veterans or military service members as they're seeking employment opportunities, extending preferences to veteran applicants so they can continue their careers in public service and state government after they leave the military. Partnering with the Defense Department on Skill Bridge, so transitioning veterans get some private sector experience in advance of the end of their military service. I mean, so there's just a lot of work that we're doing around trying to be family friendly, trying to be veteran friendly, enriching the teammate experience in a way that's complementary to your values. And I'm glad, Caitlin, that's noticed that. One of the things about being in HR and being in administrative services is we're customers of our own service, one. And two, as leaders, we should always try to show up in the way that we would have all our teammates experience the work environment. So, in fact, just yesterday, the kids, of course, are home for summer vacation. So I had my two daughters in the office with me, and they were hanging out. And, and quite frequently I'll have to leave a little bit early in the afternoon to get to baseball practice. But what I tell the leaders on my team is, look, we're working very hard. There's ebbs and flows to our work. You'll see me leave at 4:30 to get to baseball practice, but you'll see an email fired off at 8 p.m. or I'll pick it up on Saturday morning. And so we try to extend that same flexibility to our teammates at all levels in the organization. It's really about getting the work product done and keeping that high level of service, and attempting to be as flexible as possible with respect to work style and work time so that people can meet the needs of their families.
Would love to hear you talk a little bit about your about customer service. I've heard you talk about this in other times, and it's always encouraging and kind of motivating, of what we do and the difference we're making, but also the unique aspect of customer service when it comes to the public sector and
Sure.
government. So could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think something that's very lightly appreciated is that being a customer service professional or a customer experience designer in government is actually much more difficult than in the private sector. And I think our private sector counterparts would probably be surprised at the degree of difficulty that accompanies that, and how actually being a government worker in that context is actually much more difficult than being in the private sector. And one very obvious example is our private sector peers have the benefit of being able to derive inferences about customer experience from the purchasing decisions of our customers. In government, we don't have that luxury. We have a monopoly on most of the services that we provide. And so we don't get the real-time data that a purchasing decision means. I mean, so, if we're selling, again, I'll go back to my, the Intuit example. If TurboTax is winning market share from H&R Block, well, okay, we have a pretty good idea that we're meeting our customers' needs. But if you only have, one source of services like government does, it's very difficult to derive any inferences from that. So it becomes, all the more important that we as leaders are, really know our customer, talk to our customer, have empathy for their experience, both, what they need, but also how they feel about the experience as they're navigating it. And then, use that as a tool to try to, develop a sense of how we're going to measure their experience, and ultimately continuing to improve upon that. So yeah, it's one of the unique, challenging aspects of working in government is, we're all in this business because we care about the people we serve. Like you don't choose public service for reasons other than that. But it is harder than that private sector context to understand and learn and improve upon the service you're delivering because the data is more distant. And so it's really a very special skill and a challenging skill, and one that I think demands a lot of kind of entrepreneurialism to think about, okay, how am I going to get a proxy for that customer experience, attempt to measure it, and then improve upon it so that I know I'm meeting the needs of my customers.
When it comes to a job seeker who maybe isn't considering, and I know we hit on some of this already, but just maybe just more in a nutshell, what would you say to those job seekers out there that maybe either haven't considered pursuing a career in the public sector, specifically with Nebraska State Government, or just simply are not, interested for whatever reason? What would you say to counter that thinking that they may have?
I guess I would just say try it. I think there's this, the other thing that I think we've gotten more adept at is a recognition that the, modern professional and the modern government worker isn't somebody who works in government for 40 years. And I think that's kind of an antiquated bias out there that, perhaps job seekers might think that this is a heavier commitment than it is. Come try it. Give us the best 2 or 3 years of your life. Get some leadership experience, get some Lean Six Sigma experience, get some developmental experience all the diverse professional opportunities that are there for you in state government. Get this leadership experience that we can afford you at a much earlier stage in your career than you would otherwise get. Give us the best 2 to 3 to 4 years of your professional career. And then if it's not for you or you want to, go elsewhere, wonderful. And maybe you boomerang back to public service at some point in the future. I think that's consistent with what we're seeing now in terms of how modern job seekers manage their careers. And I think the state is in a position to be very complimentary of somebody for whom that's their aspirations. So I guess I would just say, don't be intimidated by a presumption that you're making a decision for a career. Maybe you are, and we hope you are. But that's also not the expectation, and it certainly isn't a prerequisite. You can come in and do some very meaningful work, make a big impact for your community, get some great leadership experience that'll only accelerate your career wherever you go. And then you can make a decision for your future when it's appropriate to do so.
Want to make sure we have time for the hot seat questions, but want to just ask you if there's anything else we didn't touch on that you would like to share or address. Anything?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
I'm apprehensive about the hot seat questions.
All right, well, we'll just move forward then. All right, first one should maybe be easy, but being from California, what do you prefer, mountains or beach?
Beach, no question. Yep. The only time I went skiing, I almost killed myself, I feel like. So
probably makes beach an easy answer then.
Beach is a very easy
Although
answer.
there's sharks in the ocean, so.
I never was worried about sharks, for whatever reason. So.
Do you surf?
No.
Okay.
No. Yeah. No, I keep my feet on the ground. But yeah, I do enjoy the beach.
The answer is not going to be surfing to this, but share something interesting about yourself that people don't know.
Oh. Something interesting that people don't know. Well, for whatever reason, this comes up, just pops into my head. I'm not sure how interesting it is, but my first anniversary, I mentioned my Navy experience right after college. My first wedding anniversary, I actually didn't experience because I crossed the international date line that day. So I went straight from September 6th to September 8th. So I like to joke that I've been married for 19 years. My wife has been married for 20 because she's had 20 anniversaries. I've only had 19. But
well, yeah, that's always something interesting. Who would play you in a movie?
So this is I was warned that this question was going to come. I always get, and now he's a little more obscure, but when I was younger, he was more common. There's an actor named David Keith. He kind of plays a lot of military roles.
Oh yeah, he was in.
He's in An Officer and Gentleman. He's in a couple of other things. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I used to always get that I looked like him, so I think they would cast him if I was in a movie. That would be a very boring movie.
A young version of
that. That's who they would. That's who
I don't know. You've had an interesting life. So, all right. What's your favorite band or song?
I'm always so bad about identifying artists. I'm a rap fan. Rap music, hip hop music is my favorite genre, but I don't have any particular artist that's a favorite of mine. Yeah.
If time travel was possible, would you go to the past or the future?
Oh wow, what a question. I'd probably go to the past. I'm very sentimental about the past. I'm also the closet genealogist in my family. And there's a number of just unknown mysteries that I've been utterly unable to unravel that I would love to go back and try to explore. I'm also very sentimental about our country's past and particularly the founding generation. So all of that would intrigue me. I think I would go into the past. Yeah.
Best book you've read?
Ooh.
A recent one, maybe?
I'll say the most impactful book I've read on me personally in terms of how I comport myself was How to Win Friends and Influence People. Was just a absolute game changer for me in terms of approaching my professional and even personal relationships, things like conversation, friendships, just really, and still all in, showing up authentically, but really giving you some interpersonal skills that for whatever reason I just hadn't been previously imbued with. So that was, whenever anybody says, hey, recommend one book, that's usually the book I say.
Best advice you've ever received?
Ooh. Well, I mean, it's tough to pick one thing. I'll stick to a professional context. And I had the benefit of a wonderful manager shortly after I left the military that really steered me in a direction of being more humble and receptive to feedback. And so he gave me a lot of wonderful coaching around what it means to have a growth mindset. And so to just really simplify, the advice was just always be appreciative of feedback and express gratitude for it, whether you regard it as well-intentioned or not, whether you like the fact that it was a phone call or an email or not. There's, and what really stuck with me was if let's say you email me negative feedback and I don't like that you emailed me, or let's say you gave it to my boss rather than giving it to me directly. Well, if I object to the manner in which the feedback was given, I'm still just showing up as defensive. And I'm not going to do anything to influence the person who's giving the feedback. All it's going to do is reflect as another negative on me. So just always express gratitude and graciousness for feedback, even if you don't agree with it, or you don't necessarily appreciate the manner in which it came, because it'll still leave you a more positive reflection of yourself and your professionalism than if you were to find it objectionable. And, and even if you disagree with it, again, expressing gratitude and thanks that the person, cared enough to give you some feedback, even if you speculate that it's insincere. Because again, there's very rarely any profit that can come to you personally about questioning that. So that was the best advice I gave, and it completely shifted my mindset around just kind of having a growth mindset and how I respond to feedback in a professional context.
All right, who's going to win this year, Army or Navy?
Oh, Navy. Go Navy, beat Army. Although now I'm conflicted. So, we didn't touch upon this, but I recently joined the Nebraska Army National Guard. So I'm actually an Army officer now, even though my undergrad was in the Navy. So I guess depending upon I either win either way or I lose either way. I'm not sure, but I'll always be rooting for Navy.
All right. Any final advice you would give to someone starting out their career?
Have a lot of humility. I think what I kind of tell early career professionals now and young job seekers is people always want to hire people that they think they would enjoy working with. And the thing that you can do that will most accelerate your career is be an active learner. Like nobody expects you to come to any job knowing the whole job, right? So just be humble, be receptive to feedback, confident but humble, and be, an enjoyable, person in the office. I mean, seriously, if you nail those two things, infinite runway in front of you, right? Who do we know that isn't successful, that isn't good at learning and a sincerely nice person? You can't name somebody who fits that description, right? You hit those two simple things, you're going to enjoy a lot of success in your career.
Great advice.
Well, thank you, Director Jackson, again for joining us today. It's been great to learn about your career journey as well as administrative services and the opportunities available with the state of Nebraska. To our listeners, if you want to check out our great career opportunities, including those available with Nebraska Department of Administrative Services, go to statejobs.nebraska.gov and click on the Find a State Job link. While you're there, you can also find links to our social media channels for Nebraska State Jobs. We'd love for you to follow us on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter to learn even more about our great career opportunities. We also encourage you to check out our YouTube channel at the Nebraska Department of Administrative Services, and be sure to hit subscribe so you're notified of future podcast episodes. Again, on behalf of our guest director, Jason Jackson, my co-host Brian, and myself, Caitlin, we want to thank you for tuning in and learning more about great careers here in the Good Life.